Hi, my name is Prior Rayburn, also known as Orton Gillingham Mama. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I plan an Orton Gillingham lesson. So this is very casual. I'm just going to be talking out my thinking, but I hope that this helps you bring all the different pieces and important components of an Orton Gillingham lesson into one streamlined piece that will help you in your planning. So let's jump in. I'm going to share my screen. This is part of my Orton Gillingham lesson plan manual, and part of that, you get a link to your own editable lesson plan. So I'm going to do that just so you see it's your own copy. And this is what it looks like. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. Let's see what this would look like. Okay, that's great. So we're just going to use a test student. Test student, we'll put in the date. Okay, and I'm going to do that just so you can see once I've put those in. If you look down at the bottom, this is the lesson plan tab, but I've also included an R&R, that's review and reinforcement student read sheet, and a new information student read sheet. So this is the part of the lesson where you're going to be having your students read as review. I'm going to click over to that tab, and as you can see, it already auto-populated what I wrote in the lesson plan, test student, and the date. And it auto-populates onto a separate page for your student. So this makes it easy for your student when you're planning. You have exactly your lesson plan and exactly a sheet like this for you to print and for your student to read directly from during the lesson. And I'll show you that on the new information lesson as well. Okay, back to the lesson plan. You can add in what lesson number this is and the teacher. The optional warm-up, my student needs help with cursive handwriting, and we're going to cover the letters C and A. So that's something I would be preparing. For the visual and auditory drill. Okay, let me jump over to, so this is my Orton Gillingham Mama, Orton Gillingham phonics scope and sequence. So moves from simple to complex, broken into 3 different levels. And down at the bottom, if you can see, it says I is the date introduced and M is the date mastered. So up here, I and M. So all the check marks are skills that when I assessed my student, she already knew. Those were mastered already, being able to come to me. So I just went ahead and checked those off. Starting here are the skills that I needed to explicitly teach. And so I just add the date so that I can remember and keep track of the fact that I explicitly taught it, when it was taught, how long we needed to continue to review it, and so on. So the last skill that I taught was OR saying or, and then today's lesson, you'll see that it's ER saying So like I mentioned, for the visual and auditory drill, you'll use these cards. You can see them here. These are 10. I wouldn't do more, and I probably would do less. Try to aim to have 10 of these phonogram cards in your deck at any one time for your drill. Generally, they're the 10 most recent skills you have taught. But let me show you, there's some structured flexibility in that. So let me show you what I mean. So again, the most recent skill that I taught was OR saying so I've got that card. The next was AR saying R. The next, I've got soft C and soft G. So I've got those cards. Then I've got vowel Y. So I pulled that card. This is interesting. I did need to teach this syllable division rule and open syllable, but the student's doing so well with that, I'm able to incorporate that practice and those words into what I'm already doing. And I'll show you that. So I'm not using that as a specific visual and auditory drill. Plus, those are not phonogram. So that's not something that goes in the visual and auditory drill. Then we have next furthest back would be TCH, then OA. We've got the vowel team. Since I'm rehearsing the A, reviewing the AI saying A, I'm just going to use that one. The student came to me already having pretty good knowledge of EE and EA, so I don't need that. Then I am including the silent E syllable in here just as a reminder for myself when we get to the R&R portion of the lesson to include those silent E words. But I'm going to show you, I'm going to keep that at the end of our visual deck. And I'll show you why. And then the last one that I really want to practice, because my student continues to have practice with or have trouble with this, is NG. And then at the very end, I keep this. So when I teach these in the visual, and I'm not teaching them, I'm reviewing them. And I go through all of these in the visual drill. And when I get to this final one, I'm not going to ask my student to, say the sound and trace it because it's not a phonogram. But again, it's a reminder to myself that I want to include words with silent E pattern. But I might ask my student checkpoints about this. In a silent E syllable, is the vowel sound long or short? Something like that. So let's go back over to the lesson plan and see what we do with those skills into our lesson plan. So here we are. So I'm going to write type OR, AR, G. If you want to, you can, to remind yourself, do C, and that's having the soft sound of S. Then we're going to do Y. In this case, I want to focus on the long I sound of Y, but we're going to keep that open. TCH, OA, AI, NG, and then silent E. And let me show you what my lesson plan does. So I entered those into the visual drill, and if I scroll down, you'll see that those auto-populated again. Whatever I typed in the visual drill is auto-populated down here into the R&R section, because then that will remind me, oh yes, I need a word to read and spell for every one of the skills in the visual drill. Okay. This is all explained in more detail in the manual, but again, I'm just kind of talking through exactly what I do. Now, if you're just starting out, one recommendation I have just to help you keep things straight for the auditory drill, this is when you say the sound, the student echoes it, and the student writes all the spellings. So what might be helpful is to write what you're going to say. These two slanted lines are called virgules, and that indicates this is the sound. So there's the sound or that you'll dictate. And then next, you write or include in there what the student will spell. So you dictate or, student echoes or, and then writes OR. Similarly, you would dictate R, and the student spells it with AR. The next one, if you need to remember, this is the soft G sound. So we're going to dictate the sound J, and the student, because now the student knows two spellings for the J sound. Remind yourself, and this is a good little cheat sheet for yourself, the order of frequency. So the most common spelling that the student knows for J is J, and then the next most common is G. So this is what you would expect the student to write, is the J, comma, G during this part. Similarly, when you dictate the S sound, you'll expect your student to spell S and then C in the auditory drill, because those are two spellings for S in the order of frequency. So for this one, again, we're going to focus on the long I, vowel Y sound. So this I would dictate long I, and I would expect at this point my student has been taught 3 spellings for the long I. I blank E, and Y. Those are in order of frequency. Next would be, I would dictate the sound ch. And again, my student now knows 2 spellings for ch. So CH, TCH. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to, since this is my copy, make this a little bigger. Or actually, you know what I'll do? Make that a little bit smaller so the font so we can see everything. Okay. Now, next, we're just continuing. You see how it all matches with what's in the visual drill. Next, I would dictate long O, and the student knows 3 spellings for long O. O, the open syllable spelling, O blank E, and OA. And again, those are in the order of frequency. Similarly with long A, the student knows A blank E, AI, and AY. So the student knows 4 spellings. I will tell you, even if you're not a new Orton Gillingham practitioner, this step can be really helpful if you're working with a lot of different students to keep track of, oh my goodness, does this student know 3 spellings for A or 2 spellings? It sometimes gets to be a lot of cognitive load for you as the practitioner. So I found that this is really helpful. Next, I would dictate ng. The student would spell ng. And then again, I'm going to leave this one blank because I will not be dictating a phoneme for the silent E card that's in my deck. So for this student, based on the assessment that I gave her, she really needs to be working on deleting initial consonants in beginning blends. So I'm going to just give you an example. This might be like flap to lap. So say flap, flap. Now say flap without f. That would be lap. So I would have prepared, maybe 7 to 10 that follow that in my phonemic awareness resource bundle. The optional exercise, I love a good blending drill. My student came in with some knowledge of the concept of initial and final blends, but that's still something that she's working on. So we would be working on a blending deck that has beginning blends and ending blends. So the C's stand for consonants and the B stands for vowels. So beginning consonant blends and final consonant blends. Okay, so goodness, look how far we've already gotten. Now remember, these visual and auditory skills, those are the exact skills that I'm going to be practicing with my student, and those were already auto-populated for me here. So what a great reminder. So now I need to think of words to read and words to spell that include each of these graphemes. So let me show you where I go for that. Okay, so here's word lists that I created because I just kept having to pull from, so many different sources. I'm going to just show you how I use this. So the first one was or. So let me flip to, I did do a little bit of tabbing just to make things a little bit faster for us. Okay. So here are 1-syllable or words, and here are 2-syllable or words. Again, my student or this student that I'm working with, spelling is a little more difficult for her than decoding. So sometimes I'm going to put a little bit trickier words, meaning 2-syllable words or words with more consonant blends in the reading, and maybe easier, more simple words for the words to spell as I, help bring this student along. So let's go with, I'm going to do storm. Let's see another good word. Ooh, you know what I love doing? Let's do forge. And I'm going to do that because I get more bang for my buck here. I get the student to practice the OR, but also there's that soft G. It's like I get 2 for 1 with this one word choice. Okay, so I've got storm and forge. Let's go back. I'm going to do storm for the word to read, if I spell it correctly. And then I did include an extra column for you if you want to include extra words. But for, again, time's sake, I'm going to skip that today. And then we're going to do forge. That's probably a word that I would need to discuss with my student briefly about the word meaning, perhaps show them a picture. Taking that little bit of time to discuss word meanings is crucial for so many of our students. Next, because we already know what we need, are R words, AR. So let me flip back. You can look, this is exactly what I do. So you're seeing inside my crazy brain as we plan. Okay, so now we got AR words. Again, if my student is slightly better at this point at decoding, perhaps I give a 2-syllable word. Let's do marlin for reading. And then, what about dart? And I'm going to tell you as I'm writing why I'm going to do dart. So we've got marlin, and then I go over to spell dart. I would make a note for myself because, one of my favorite types of words, dart is a great multiple meaning word. So yes, it has the AR grapheme that our student needs to practice, but it also has 2 different meanings. It could be, the noun, the thing that you throw at a dartboard, which is what some of our students would think of. But what a great verb too, to dart across the room or the field, to run quickly. So again, spending the time to talk through those multiple meanings really helps your students orthographically map those words so that they read and spell them with more efficiency and automaticity. So now we've got soft G. So let's find some soft G words. You can help me. Okay, again, I'm thinking that this student could handle 2 syllables. So let's do rampage for the word to read. I'm feeling good. Ooh, look, here is that beginning consonant blend that would be great to review, but we get into soft G with the J. So rampage and plunge. As I'm doing this, I want you to see how our student read sheet is coming along. Because again, it auto-populates for you. I'm all about helping you save time. And this was a recommendation from a wonderful colleague of mine. So we have her to thank. But let's see. So far in the R&R, our student has 3 words to read: storm, marlin, and rampage. Let's see what that's looking like on the student read page. There they are: storm, marlin, rampage. So as we continue to add more words, that word list would auto-populate over here. So I hope that that helps. At least you see how I go back and forth with my word list, add them here, and I'm constantly thinking of how can I pick words that are either 2 for 1, meaning they have more than one phonics skill, and or have multiple meanings, or are tier 2 words that maybe our students are familiar with the word meaning wise, but they haven't really grasped the meaning. So it'd be a great one to discuss the vocabulary. So I'm going to just go ahead and add some of these words that I ahead of time picked out. Ooh, hitchhike. Look at that. I've got the TCH, which is in that row that I need to address, but ooh, I've also got a silent E syllable, which is also a skill. So there's another 2 for 1. Oatmeal, that's addressing the OA, but even though my student had mastered the EA on the assessment, what a great way to weave it back in and make sure that my student still actually does remember it. For AI, let's do raincoat. Again, 2 for 1. I get an AI and I get an OA. Spring, that might be another word that I pause to discuss the multiple meanings of. And then silent E, how about backbone? Ooh, I get the CK review with the silent E. So let's look at what that looks like on the student read sheet now. Now, all of them are there for you. You simply print this. It has the student's name, the date, print, and you go. Then back to the lesson plan. I'm just going to fill these in. Again, I probably would add both the word to read and spell at the same time like I did with the first three, but I just kind of wanted to fill these in for you. For this, let's do voice. And I just thought of something that was very important, and I'm going to pause. I'm picking words from these word lists that only include phonics skills that I've explicitly taught or that my student showed mastery of on her assessment. So if I find a great, a great word, but it has a PH in it, even if it's a great word that follows another one of the phonograms, I can't use that word yet because very systematic and explicit in I'm only providing students with words where all of the phonograms I have explicitly taught or they've shown mastery. So I'm glad we went over that. So let's see if I was in the soft C part. Okay. All of these I think would be they're pretty good. My student knows all of these sounds. So let's look back here. Okay, we did voice. And I'm going to use the word hybrid. Ooh, what a good word. I wonder if they know if I spell it correctly, what that means. And the word match, again, it's in that TCH row. Ooh, another good match would be another good multiple meaning word. You be thinking about the different multiple meanings of that as I keep writing. I've got roach, mailbox, fling, and landslide. Okay, good. So the words to spell, that's not auto-populated anywhere because the student wouldn't be reading those. The student will read the words to spell after she spells them, but not on a separate sheet for my lesson planning purposes. So we always want to try to plan 2 sentences for the R&R. So here, I'm going to be looking back up in here, all of these phonograms, see how many of these phonograms I can use the graph beams in a sentence. So it's kind of like a challenge. So let's see. I did come up with some of these ahead of time. What if I did, you are in charge of the sailboat in the storm. Ooh. So I've got the AR in charge, the soft G in charge, the AI and OA in sailboat, and then the OR in storm. Thinking that's pretty good. That's a lot of review. Another sentence to read. We clung to the side of the switchback. Whew, makes me nervous even thinking about what that would look like if you're on like the side of a cliff. Of course, I did that too quickly. So there we've got the NG, TCH, and then side with the silent E syllable. So let's see if those auto-populated onto our R&R read sheet. There they are. The student would read, you were in charge of the sailboat in the storm, and we clung to the side of the switchback. I would also have 2 sentences to spell ready for your student. So again, this will not auto-populate anywhere because you will be dictating it to your student. Your student will echo it, spell it on paper, and then your student will read that sentence from his or her own paper. But what if we did the sentence, can we skydive twice into the park? Ooh, and I love a good question. Asking them, making sure that the student is spelling not only the graph beams correctly, but adding the correct punctuation mark. There we've got the Y saying I, the silent E, soft C, and the AR. So that's a lot in one sentence. And then one more, his voice is, ooh, I'm going to add in sort of hard to match. So I just added in sort of because then there's another OR sound that I would make sure that my student knows how to spell. Okay, so that's the R&R section. Pretty straightforward, I hope. So I hope that helps. The next part of your lesson, and before I move on, I will say this R&R section, This is the majority of your lesson. Orton Gillingham students need so much review. So don't be afraid if this is where you spend the majority of your time. We're moving on to the new information, and that might take, 5 to 7 minutes of your whole lesson. Today, as I mentioned earlier, because I had taught AR, OR. It's very common. A lot of our students, you're not going to be teaching something new every lesson. Again, give yourself and your students time to really practice and review very explicitly and systematically some of that new information. So for the OR, my student needed more than one lesson with that. So we sat with that, but now the student is ready for the next spelling in that R controlled syllable, which is ER saying ER saying Okay, similarly, we have words to read and words to spell. But before we get to that part, again, I did pull these up, but I would explicitly teach, ER says I would have my student trace this. So I need to have, this is part of what I'm preparing, to make sure that I have this new phonogram card pulled and ready to go. Also part of my new information instruction would be, let's see, let me show you. That's not what I wanted to show you next because that's coming, is I love good anchor charts, these posters. These are ones that I started making for all the different spelling patterns. There's DGE, there's kind old words, but here's one for what we're working on today. ER saying there's a little saying her ferns that matches the picture. And then similarly, I use this in every one of my new information lessons is a student recording sheet. What I love about these is it reminds you and the student of the checkpoints. Like here it says, ER says, the vowel is neither long nor short. It is now controlled by the R. Then it has words for the student to read, spaces for them to spell, and then a little bit of application. So how many letters are in the word perch? How many sounds do you hear in perch? And then write a sentence using the word serve. So again, this is something I created for all the different skills that I would teach to my students. It keeps me on track in the new information, and it's a great tool for the student to be able to refer back to as well. So I would make sure I have these pulled up, printed out, and ready to go when I plan my lesson. So the student could read these words off the page, or we could, I'll show you in this how we would make sure we have other words ready to go to read as well. So let's do perk. That's supposed to be germ. Stern, clerk, after, gather. Notice that moving simple to complex, I added the 2-syllable words towards the end of the words to read, just so that the student has, practice at the 1-syllable level first. And I realized I spelled clerk incorrectly. That wouldn't help. So let's see what that would look like. So now we wouldn't be going to the R&R student read sheet. We'd be going to the new info student read sheet. There's the new information, ER saying and all the words that I just typed. How exciting. And it's done for me. Again, any way to save time, but also helps me remember exactly what I need to do. Okay, so then I have the student spell words. I like to put in probably more words than I would have my student spell because you just want to be prepared. So I might only have my students spell 3 words, but I'm going to go ahead and plan 6 just in case I need more. So all of these, again, are focused on the ER spelling, saying and they do not include any other graphemes that I've not yet taught my student. Now, let's move to phrases or sentences to read. For most students, it's going to be sentences. For those younger students, if they're not able to read at the sentence level first, you could do phrases, but let's come up with at least one sentence to read. So what about we train the dogs to herd goats. Again, I would be going back to my R&R section and think, how many words can I come up with that review those patterns from the R&R while also weaving in some wonderful ER words. So I've got herding the goats here, herd. Then another one to read, be stern, but do not display anger. I'm able to use these 2-syllable words because my student has shown me that she is able to divide syllables well. If she wasn't able to do that yet, I would have to be even choosier with the words to make sure that I was not including 2-syllable words yet. It's also really hard to come up with the correct verb tense without adding in, ed or the suffix ed or suffix s. So just again, things that I'm constantly thinking of when coming up with these words and sentences. Let's see what that looks like on the new info read sheet. So we've got the words to read. There are sentences. So this sheet would be ready to print and go. I'm going to add in one sentence to spell. Let's see, did the cars merge on the road? So again, I've got that ER. I know I need that in my sentence to spell, but I also added in a word with AR because that was a recently taught skill, and one with OA. So there you go. That's exciting. That new information is almost planned. The next part is you want to make sure you have an oral reading text prepared, again, for younger students. And as they're working through the first, especially level 1 on my sequence, it's going to be mostly decodable text. It could be fiction, it could be nonfiction decodable text. But then as you start to get into level 2 and students show a little bit more automaticity, you can start weaving in less controlled text. So I go into that in my manual. But for this oral reading, and I pulled this up earlier, but I'm kind of between 2 stories. So one is one that I wrote called Fern and Herbert. It's a great fiction story, but even just at first glance, this story has a lot of 2-syllable words, which my student might be able to do. But with Fern as a sprinter, she runs faster, harder. All of those are great words, but I haven't yet taught my student, at least I didn't in this lesson, and I'm not planning on, how ER can also act as a suffix, meaning comparing, or one who does. So I don't know if this is the best passage for this student. It might be a great one for another student, or it could be a great passage for when I do go back and teach ER as a suffix. But I think a better option would be this nonfiction passage that I wrote about verbs. So it's a lot more 1-syllable words. There are comprehension questions included. So I think this is going to be the best option, and I'll also explain why in just a second. So I'm going to add verbs. That's the title to my lesson plan. And then I'm also going to say answer questions. If time is running short, you can ask your student these questions orally, but if you want to have them practice writing the answer, it's there for you as well. And this is the part I was going to say, another reason that I wanted to use this topic for the oral reading was part of the grammar that I want to weave into my lesson is reviewing the concept of verbs and nouns. So in the R&R section, in the new information section, this is a good way to weave in. So, and I just want to bring your attention to one piece about that. So let's go back to the new information section where it says, we train the dogs to herd goats. If I asked my student without reading that sentence, what is the part of speech of the word train? Well, the student might say a noun. But until we put the word in context, like we have here, the word could be multiple meanings. It could have multiple parts of speech. A colleague once told me that words are not born a part of speech. And boy, is that true. So the best way to practice parts of speech, grammar, syntax is to do it with connected text. So weaving in the grammar with the sentences is a great way, and something that you as an Orton Gillingham practitioner, I hope you will do as well. So when my students read, "We train dogs to herd goats," perhaps I would engage them in conversation about what is the function of the word train here. Is it an action? Is it a noun? Is it a thing? And help them talk through, actually, the function of the word train here is a verb. It's an action. It's the action that we are doing. So that's a great, easy way to weave in vocabulary. And if I'm not weave in vocabulary, weave in grammar. So again, if I knew I was going to be practicing that, what a great way to then read a story about verbs. Last thing, important, and it only takes less than a minute, is a very short auditory, visual, kinesthetic recap. So I always want to make sure I have this ready to go. So I'm just going to show the student. I'm going to, again, have that card out. This is the visual. Another visual, and I might just do this real quick. So perhaps the student, I show as the recap after they've read. I say, okay, I want you to leave this lesson with the new learning cemented. So I could show the student the card. Student sees it and says the sound as she traces ER. And I can show you what that would look like here. So she sees this. She says, Maybe she does it 3 times. I could hand her a word to read. She reads verb. There's your auditory, visual, kinesthetic, and her brain is leaving, remembering exactly the new learning. There's no new teaching. And I think that's setting up her brain for success in the next lesson. Now we get to the end of our lesson plan. I've got my R&R student read sheet ready to go. I've got my new info student read sheet ready to go. I can print, and voila. So again, I hope that helped. Please reach out if you have any questions. Again, my manual really explains all of those pieces in great detail, but I just wanted you to see how all the pieces fit together, moving simple to complex, but also all those other wonderful questions as you as an Orton Gillingham practitioner can be asking yourself as you pick words and sentences that are really individualized for your student. So good luck, have fun, enjoy, and I can't wait to hear about it. Bye.